1, 2, 3. Hello and welcome to Green Queens, the perfect podcast for imperfect environmentalists. We're your hosts, sustainability and climate presenters Imogen and Abbie, and this is your guilt-free guide to living a little greener.
Hello and welcome to Green Queens.
Welcome to Green Queens. If anyone is watching this podcast, they will notice that we are in a very, very special location. We've done a bit of a school trip.
We are literally like two 13-year-old girls on a school trip. We've made the journey to Poole for a very special reason, to visit a very special company and a very special Green Queens guest.
So Ruth, I think you should probably introduce yourself because you have, before we clicked record, I was like, right, let me just check how to introduce you. And then I just sort of wrote some things and then did a few little scribbles. It'd be much better if we hear it from you directly.
All right.
Can you kick us off by telling us who you are and what you do?
That's a big question.
And where we are.
And where we are.
So my name is Ruth Andrade and I'm originally from Brazil, but I've been living in the UK for a long time. And I was Lush's first environment officer. I started working in a Lush shop in Covent Garden. Yeah, back in the day where, people moved up into a sustainability role. And I actually created the role from the very beginning. I think I started doing this in 2005. And then today, my role is much more focused on engagement and communication. And I do a lot of, interviews like this and speak engagement, but also a lot of internal getting staff fired up and inspired to take action.
I mean, I feel like anybody watching would have been able to tell where we are because of this amazing room that we're in. We're in the Lush's archive, which feels very special because it's a big year for Lush, isn't it, this year?
That's correct.
30 years old.
Yes. So this is our 30th anniversary. And our first shop opened in 1995 here in Poole. So we are in the home of Lush where, still our UK factory. So all the products that are sold in the UK are manufactured here in Poole. And then a few years ago, we decided we've always had like a Lush archive, but this was the first time we got a proper home that people could visit. And it's super exciting because we have customers like finding things in their attic from the 90s. So this is a really amazing place where we have a whole history of Lush products, but you can also see the evolution, right? And including products from the previous brand that was called Cosmetics to Go.
Well, it's so incredible being here because there's a bag that you can see, well, we can see, but the cameras can't see. And I was like, oh my God, I am suddenly transported back to the late 90s, to the early 2000s with the old branding. And, you'd go into the high street, you'd go spend a Saturday in town and Lush was front and centre. You'd spend hours in there with your friends. And it's so nostalgic being in here. It's absolutely incredible. But I think the thing that is really interesting to us is that Lush may be 30 years old, but that kind of stance that it's taken on sustainability has been the consistent thread throughout that time, which is interesting when you think around the rest of the world was not necessarily on board, particularly in the kind of beauty and cosmetics side of things. So I wonder if you could just give us a whistle-stop tour of Lush's commitment to sustainability and some of the things that you're really, really proud of that put Lush on the map.
I think Lush was founded by very keen bird watchers and people who were already involved in some of the early movements here in the environmental movements here in the UK. So I think there is like that foundation energy that is so important. And then there used to be another business called Cosmetics to Go, which was a really successful mail order business where they were really inventing lots of things. And things like shampoo bars or bath bombs were invented around that time. But they were all wrapped in packaging, really elaborate packaging sometimes. And then that they had lots of different issues around a sale that went badly, floods in their offices, and the company ended up going to administration. And when the foundation team reorganized and decided to restart another business, they bootstrapped their business, and the lack of packaging was also an economic decision as well as an ecological decision. So that was really the birth of this modern naked cosmetics of our time. So Lush invented shampoo bars, they invented bath bombs, they invented deodorant bars, they revitalized the soap that you could cut and made that popular. So those things have been there from the very beginning of almost the ethos with which Lush was born. And then when it was, I think, circa 2007, there was this moment where L'Oreal bought the Body Shop. And the Body Shop kind of held the presence in the high street of being the activist brand and really educating, right? Engaging customers. Customers really were educated through a lot of what the Body Shop did. And I think we felt that selling to L'Oreal was a big thing in terms of credibility. And then Lush decided to step up and become much more like outward facing and vocal about the ethics. Until then, it was just kind of embedded in the products, but then it became much more vocal. And that's when we started doing campaigns. Our first campaign product was a beautiful bath bomb called Guantanamo Gardens. And the campaign was buy one, set one free. And all the money went to Reprieve to release the British prisoners that were in Guantanamo Bay. So it was like super powerful like campaign. And then we had naked campaign, we had palm oil campaign, biodiesel campaign. Like we had many animal, human, and environmental rights campaigns. So I think that was the era. Then Lush really decided to take like an open, formal stance. And then with that, we evolved a lot of our thinking behind this. And probably the thing I'm proudest is every company, the biggest impact is the supply chain by far, like if you're a cosmetics company. And I think we've done a lot of work to look into opportunities to not just reduce our impact in the supply chain, but actually find ways to have a more positive impact by the way we're buying our materials. And I think Lush has really evolved the buying policy and our capacity to be working with grassroots farmers, with women cooperatives, with communities that are in the forest or on the buffer zones, just outside forests, so that we're getting materials in ways that are supporting or sometimes even regenerating the environment.
I think what's interesting, being someone that has grown up with the brand, I remember, so I grew up in a place called Grimsby, which didn't have a Lush store, but my dad used to work in London every now and again and would often bring back these packages. Maybe it was in the run up to my mum's birthday or Christmas, and all of a sudden the house would just smell like a Lush store. But that, as a child, that like kinesthetic, overwhelming kind of stimulation that you get from the Lush products, it almost, as a child, you're completely oblivious to the fact that they're plastic free because it's just an amazing bath bomb that you plop in your bath and you go and you can touch them in the shop and smell them and feel them. But how much do you think of that is almost like, I don't want to say unintentional, but you are encouraging people to shop in a more ethical way, but you're not forcing that information down their throat. They're kind of just enjoying the products for the fact that they're great products anyway. How much of that is intentional, do you think?
I think first we want to make a really great product, and we say like a product for every need. So I think the effectiveness of the product, the fun element, the how you interact. I think Lush is a very sensorial brand, and it's like a handmade brand. It's a human-centric brand, and I think that we want, because I don't think really deep green customers, those are not our customers. Our customers is basically the general public. It's, young women that the values is like an add-on, but it's not the main reason for people to come to Lush. And I think that's how you actually create change. It's making things that anyone, can have, and you don't have to be a certain type of person to relate to the brand. And that's how you get like large scale impact, right? Otherwise you're always speaking to a bubble. And I think Lush has been able to step outside of that bubble. But we talk a lot about values for money, and we use this phrase of like what's inside that counts. And I think that idea that we want customer to trust that we have done the due diligence behind the scenes, so you don't have to change how you make a decision about a product or not. But of course, we still would love for everyone to take the naked products home and, use the shampoo bar, conditioner bar, etc.
One of the things that's absolutely incredible is that we've done a factory tour this morning, and it has been kind of like Willy Wonka for millennial women. I think it really has, because there is so much joy and personality and beautiful fragrances, of course.
If we could bottle the smell. I mean, you guys literally have, but if only this was smell-o-vision.
Oh my gosh. Also, another excellent 90s reference there.
We're so old.
Oh, we are so old. And I apologise to all the Gen Z listeners who are like, God, you guys should retire. We've walked around the factory, and it's been amazing to see that when you say handmade. It literally means handcrafted. And the ingredients literally are fruits in the fridge. It is incredible to see. And of course, that just in time, making things so that, you know, you make them just at the last point that you need to make them, that they're going to be sold reasonably quickly. It is all sort of towards that sustainable mindset. And yet there are certain things that may challenge that. For example, virality is not necessarily a helpful thing when it comes to having that sustainable process.
And like that means kind of, I don't know, something going viral on TikTok and therefore all of your stores selling out. Yeah.
Yeah, that has happened so much in the last few years with sticky dates and super milk.
Yeah. So how do you balance that in sort of your forecasting and making sure that you can have that very, very sustainable supply chain?
Yeah, I think if you ask our buyers, that puts them into a lot of stress. I think the number one thing is, for example, Super Milk has extra virgin olive oil, and we have many suppliers. So we'll have usually a variety of really amazing suppliers. Like we have a supplier in Doga, Turkey, that is connected to BirdLife International, and they are Asian olive groves, really Asian trees. The whole place is for bird conservation. We also buy olive oil from the West Bank, right? So we have a series of suppliers that are able to cater for when we have those needs. But for example, sometimes it's really challenging, like the gourmand smell, like the beautiful gourmand smell that's everywhere. That's a mix between vanilla and cinnamon, is actually from nut from a palm tree from the Amazon called tonka. And it's the tonka beans. And we buy the tonka beans directly from communities and have it turned into fragrance in France. And that is a huge issue because that material is at so much risk of climate change, is at risk of deforestation. It's really difficult to then suddenly increase global supplies. So those are like day-to-day issues that we have to do. And sometimes it means maybe reformulating a product, or we're now really seriously looking at how climate risk can impact some key materials and key ranges. And then what is the plan B? Like, how can we put a plan in place so we can, use different materials with the same efficacy, right? But I think diversity is key here. I think everyone is only buying palm oil. We get the issues that we saw with palm oil deforestation. But if everyone buying palm oil then suddenly changes to coconut oil, we're probably going to see coconut oil-led deforestation. So I think we've been really good at trying to create diversity in some critical materials, and plant oils is one of those things. But it just throws things around. I also know, for example, last year, we launched prevented ocean plastics bottles. So we're working with a cooperative in Indonesia that works to formalize waste pickers, so they have better working conditions, and they have a super clean feedstock for recycled PT. And that is purchased, or the cooperatives are within 50 kilometers from, the main rivers or sources of like plastic pollution in the world for the oceans. And this is a great project that is, giving local income to the population, helping organize the waste pickers. But there are limits to how much they can produce. And then if a product becomes super popular, then, what is it's always having a plan B, I'd say. And making the plan B as ethical as plan A, right? That's the work.
I think what will be surprising to some listeners, don't get me wrong, there'll be some people listening going, yeah, I knew that Lush were doing all this stuff. I've totally always known that they've been a really great and ethical brand. But there will be some people that are surprised by this, even just from conversations I've had with my mates, to say, oh, we're doing this Green Queens app, we're going to the Lush headquarters. And they just don't really know about it. And the amount of red tape you guys are met with, the amount of additional work and the additional cost that you guys must have to go through. You are nodding enthusiastically for those that are not watching. But Ruth, I wonder how much of your oomph and passion and determination for doing this comes from the upbringing that you had and where you grew up.
Yeah. I think I say that I grew up in a concrete jungle, but I also grew up spending all my summer holidays along the coast, and you literally have to cross.
Not the British coast.
Not the British coast.
Yeah. Not Poole.
you have to cross a really amazing piece of rainforest, which is the Atlantic rainforest, which at the moment, they're only between like 7% and 10% left from when the Portuguese first arrived in Brazil. So imagine the whole east coast of Brazil with just forest. And that's, again, a super biodiverse forest. And I think just seeing the destruction, of the environment like happen before your eyes. I grew up in the 80s and early 90s. And I think that really created some, like you're seeing as it happens rather than, I think like if you're in the UK, the country's already so developed that you're not observing development as it happens, like this extractive development. And I think Brazil, we were closer to that. Yeah. But the 90s, there was also so much pollution, right? So I saw all of this. And at home, I remember my sister was the first one. She studied biology. And we used to make so much fun of her because she was like vegetarian. She kept telling us about, the environment. And then I ended up being that person. But I think for me, it was a gradual interest. And also something that I think is important here. I came from a city who had a really amazing progressive mayor in the 90s. And when I was growing up in the 90s, well, I was already a young woman, but we had 99% of the city had recycling at the door level, even in the suburbs, and some slums had like recycling collection in the 90s. Yeah.
Because I remember when we got our recycling bin in the 2000s.
Yeah.
In the UK.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then like there was a school park where you could actually do lots of environmental courses. They had participatory budgeting. They were doing amazing work with like women's rights. And I grew up in that environment, like with this really,
progressive,
such progressive government. So I remember I was involved in visiting the recycling cooperatives, like we saw today at the Green Hub, and helping to implement it in the building where I live, and taking like all the housewives into a van to go see, what was happening to the waste, because that like direct connection is so important to change people's behavior. It was really great. And when I arrived in London, I was like, oh my God, this is so backward. It's like,
which is not what people would assume at all.
And this is how I got the job. Like I was actually just a sales assistant, and the owner of Lush, like Mark, walked into our shop, and I was like, but we're not doing this, we're not doing that. Like, how come? Look at the lighting, and like our packaging doesn't have the plastic recycling number. I don't even know how to recycle. I gave him a really hard time. I said, do you want to do it? I said, sure. He said, okay. You do it.
Yes.
But it was because I had that firsthand experience. So I think this is why we can do as much as we want from a personal, like we can change our habits and our personal choices. But one of the most important things we can do is vote for the people that are creating the right infrastructure so people can behave in a way that's better for the future and, the planet.
You mentioned there the Green Hub, which we had the pleasure and joy of walking around this morning. Can you describe what it is and what it does?
Oh, yes. So the Green Hub...
Is that your baby?
Yeah. Well, no, it actually isn't. But the Green Hub is the heart of what we call Lush circular economy. So we have collected that was my baby. We introduced a take back scheme for our packaging in 2009. So, again, very early days.
Yeah.
And I think that evolved over time. Also super challenging to like take packaging back at the time without like a really amazing infrastructure in the country to be able to recycle things without having to export the waste and all of this. And then, so we wanted to have a place where we could confidently and with a lot of transparency bring all the packaging that our customers bring to us and process all the waste from manufacturing, do innovation, do education. And something that's important for us is that we don't export the recycling, because I think that happens a lot still in the UK. I think it was just last year, for the first time in a long time, that actually our internal recycling capacity overtook exports of plastic recycling. Yeah, I was talking to someone from RAP, and that was the first time that it happened last year. So we had this strong ethos of being responsible for the waste that we're creating and the waste that we're putting in the market. And we got funding to set up a full like sorting facility, like a materials recovery facility. but doing it in a way that we can bring groups, schools, businesses, other businesses that want to visit. And then you can see what happens to the packaging that you return to Lush, right? You will get shredded and washed, and so we can get the best quality material. Then for all of our pots and any like polypropylene packaging, the type of plastic, it will get returned into new packaging. So we have tried to set up different closed loops to make sure that we keep materials at their highest value. That is the whole thing about the circular economy, is to use less, but also keep materials circulating at their highest value. So yeah, that's like the Green Hub in a nutshell. We also do lots of product donations. So a lot of the product waste, whether it's overstock or it's mostly because it's overstocked. Because it's hard to know what's going to do really well.
These things don't have a shelf life of forever because they're so fresh and organic.
Exactly. We have actually shorter lives than most cosmetics. Then we have a team dedicated to finding good homes for the products. So women's refuge, daycare centers, like you name it, refugee support organizations, schools.
And there was a lot of things that we probably were expected to see in the Recycle Hub. There was people sorting through all of the old returns. There was this amazing plastic shredding machine. And then there was a Barbie dream house.
Yeah.
Which may or may not have caught our eye.
Yes, the Barbie collaboration. The divisive Barbie collaboration. Some people loved, others were like, oh. So I think, because now with the Green Hub, we have so much more space. Everything is designed for a linear economy, right? So whenever you want to reuse things, you need to store them. You need to organize it. You need to have a good workflow and process.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of warehouse racking, a couple of sides for the events team, so the events team can keep all their Barbie collab
but it makes
pieces
total
of wood.
sense because it can be the next dream house for the next brand collab. There's no need, and like I think you mentioned, you don't need to mention the brand, but there was another high street retailer that did do a collaboration on the release of the Barbie movie, and then all of their stuff that they had bought or made was found in a skip a couple of weeks after the launch. And you're like, what?
And so we're always painting stuff over, and then we have that quite organized. And then same thing for the SSP team that do all the shop fit outs. Whenever we have like extra tiles, right? Or extra materials, we also store it for the next fit out. We try to reuse furniture from one store to the other. We try to refurbish furniture. So that all happens within this circular heart, which is the Green Hub.
Because that was the incredible thing, is that we walked in and expected to see a load of plastic recycling, and there was a beautiful chair, and you're like, okay, I need to explain what's going on here. But it really strikes me that, there is absolute value in retaining those materials in-house, and especially because you know what's in those materials and you know which materials you need to generate. And so there's a degree of simplicity that's created in keeping it in-house. But at the same time, it's hugely expensive to do so. And that means that either you've got to pass on that cost to your customers, to the consumers, or you've got to accept that it's going to be a less profitable business, which it feels kind of wrong that acting in a responsible and sustainable way is not necessarily the most profitable thing to do. And I wonder how those conversations unfold here at Lush.
Yeah, I think if we weren't privately owned, I doubt that we would make. I say that, I always joke that it's a miracle that Lush can exist and is a profitable business, because we make so many anti-commercial decisions. Like really, it's a daily activity making anti-commercial decisions.
Even today, I said, what Instagram should I be tagging? And lovely Annabelle, who was giving us the tour, said, you do know that we're not on social media. Of course I knew that you were not on social media, but that is... Yeah. What a bold decision to make a couple of years ago.
Exactly. And even things like renewable energy, right? We have renewable electricity in all of the stores, in all of the countries. And that costs, we've had renewable electricity in the UK since 2008. We're talking about many millions of pounds over these years to have renewable electricity. Recycled packaging, everything costs more. The materials that we use, it all costs more. And then I think we do both. A bit of it, we definitely pass it on to the customers. That's why our products are not, let's say, the cheapest on the high street. But we say that we embed the values, right? So we are externalizing less of the costs. And then the second is our profitability is also not what you would expect. So a big cosmetics brand will spend 30% of their whole budget on advertising. Like our brand budget is very small. We don't do tons of paid advertising. You will hardly ever see Lush paid TV ads. Like we've never done a paid TV ad.
Yeah.
We are available if you want to do one, by the way.
We are happy to take on that burden. Not a problem.
And then I think that money we get to spend on better things.
Yeah.
Like our packaging is super simple because we want to spend the money on the ingredients and things like this. But the way the economy works is that we are all paying for those things. We're just paying them through environmental costs and through social costs. So I think at Lush, we have managed to internalize more of the costs that normal capitalism externalized to communities and society and the earth, of course. And yeah, the minute you internalize those costs, then you have to account for them somehow.
And I wonder, are there other, and you may not be able to make any comments on this, but are there other cosmetic brands who are looking at Lush thinking, how do we implement some of that stuff? And do you ever get those questions from other brands?
I'm part of the Sustainable Beauty Coalition, which is super interesting. Like the British Beauty Council in the UK has a group, which is the Sustainable Beauty Coalition. And that's interesting because we have lots of working groups. And I'm on the reuse and refill working group together with Beauty Kitchen, Wrap, and, other other players in the sector. And it's super interesting because you have the big brands and the little brands all kind of working together towards a shared aim, which is to make the beauty industry in the UK more sustainable. And for the month of March, we all collaborated around something called the Great British Beauty Cleanup. So, for example, you find on the British Beauty Council website a joint map of all the take-back schemes of all the cosmetics brands in the UK. So like we're trying to make it really easy for customers to be able to make the right decision. So you have like all of these like joint efforts to change consumer behavior. And I think that's like super exciting because then we can influence each other. No one is perfect. Everyone is doing something, some people more than others. But I think if we collaborate more, we can, accelerate change more quickly.
And I mean, I don't purport to be an expert in the beauty industry at all. I'm definitely not that at all. But it really, really strikes me with Lush that it is this global, successful business that we have grown up with and known our whole life. And, you mentioned the lack of marketing. I feel like the smells do that anyway.
Yeah.
But how rare is it, do you think, for such a company of its size to still feel that kind of family, which very much you do get that vibe when you're here. The people's faces are literally on the products that they're making, and then also the ability to for everything to be so close loop and to have such an enormous recycle hub on site. How rare is this whole thing for a company of this size?
I think it's
maybe
pretty
an
rare.
ignorant question, but
I think there are a couple of things about Lush that are really special. First, we're privately owned, and then we have quite a lot of vertical integration. So we make our own products. So lots of cosmetics brands, especially smaller brands or celebrity brands, they're all contracting out cosmetics manufacturer. And then it's really hard for you to have full control of the raw materials or the manufacturing conditions. Other brands are manufacturing loads where like labor costs are lower or, there is less legislation. And Lush always, because of the fresh in the name, and because we need to have shorter supply chains, we have put factories around the world in the biggest markets. So we actually we manufacture in Toronto, in Canada. We manufacture in Poole, in the UK, in Croatia, in Japan, in Australia. So we manufacture in places where with really strong labor legislation, with really strong environmental legislation. And then we have also developed lots of projects in the supply chain. So we have 2 concessions in Peru that we're using to increase biodiversity, and we have camera traps. And my favorite thing is I have a log of all the camera trap footage and all the species that were, and a wonderful team working with this. A shout out to Nerea. Named all the species and what is their vulnerable status. So we have like threatened species with extinction, vulnerable status, and we have videos of pregnant spotted jaguars on our land in Peru. We have videos of like a pack of the wild dogs of the Amazon that is super rare. It's just stunning. And I love like showing that to staff so they can really make the connection of the product that they're selling and what is behind that.
Who'd have thought a bath bomb led to a baby cheetah?
Exactly. I'm like, we have our own pets, like wild pets.
Lush babies.
Lush babies. And I think that vertical integration and then we we mostly sell in our own stores, and this is a huge difference. So we're not competing with other cosmetics brands in the supermarket. So because we have so much control of the value chain, we can really make sure that every part of the way has been thought out. I think my thing with Lush, that I'm always talking about these things, is we are very not perfect. I'm really not perfect. We're not an organic brand. We're not a 100% natural brand. We're not a full zero waste brand. Like, they're all the things that we're not a full vegan brand. So we don't tick any boxes, but we have done so much across a much broader range of areas than most other brands will have done. So, and that's really hard to communicate because it's not a label or it's not like a checklist. Like, you can't fit the brand into a box.
Perfect for a podcast, though.
Perfect for a podcast. Thank you. I have the platform. But yeah, like little things. Like we put a lot of work in like divestment. We'd really love that our money is not being used to fund new fossil fuel. New fossil fuel developments. So we were like, but like Triodos is one of the most ethical banks, probably the most ethical bank here in the UK. They are from the Netherlands, and they have really strong policies. But they don't have like a high street presence. It's really hard for our shops to be banking with a bank like Triodos from a very practical point of view. But we said, all right, so let's put our cash reserve. So Christmas, when we raise most of the cash, let's put all the cash into Triodos. And that's what I mean about we're not seeking perfection. We're seeking what's possible within the constraints that we have. And then we're really, really straight about tax. We are in no tax havens. We have the fair tax mark, like the things that really matter. We're like 100% renewable electricity. It took us a little while to get there. And we are always trying to improve across a broad range of areas rather than just focus on packaging or just focus on ingredients.
But it seems like the net effect of that is that, okay, yes, you're not ticking a box that is a convenience from a marketing perspective, but actually having a very, very real impact on multiple communities with a broad range of different needs. Like we've been looking at some of the artwork, which is designed by people with learning difficulties, for example. And is that, that impact is maybe more difficult to shout about, but it's much more meaningful.
Yeah. And sometimes it's so much, then to choose what it is that we want to shout about is so hard.
I was thinking, how on earth do we keep this podcast to within an hour? Because we've not even touched on, I know that there was a big celebration that you did last year around the charity pots and giving £100 million to grassroots causes, which I think, again, you stood at a till, somebody asked if you want to donate money to charity, you feel a bit pressured, you don't really know what to do, maybe you've a little bit strapped for cash anyway. With those charity pots that you guys do at Lush, they're those tiny little hand creams. They're actually very flipping lovely and good.
Yeah.
How much are they? £1, £2? £1.
But we stopped selling them last year.
Did you? But that was a great celebration off the back of it to say what the money went to. And it wasn't the RSPCA, which is a wonderful charity. It was a charity that probably you've never heard of, but lots and lots of little small grassroots communities that really saw the benefit of that money.
Yeah. We funded it over 15 years. 100 million. We distributed 100 million pounds to 19,000 organizations.
That's wild.
It's wild.
Absolutely astonishing.
How do you even find them?
I think like 19,000 grants, because there are always repeated organizations. But we've always been very attuned to what's happening in our local communities, and we have people in market distributing the funds. And our funding strategy has changed, so now it's much more focused on specific products, so the customer knows where the money is going. But we are really committed to funding like grassroots organizations and grassroots activism. So we funded a lot of the activism that like kept fracking from being done in the UK, or that really built capacity to replace animal testing. So I think business is such an organizing force in society, right? It's where there is money, there is platform, there are people, there is engagement. So the idea that if business has a direction towards, expressing its essence, but in dialogue with what else is happening to create a better world for everyone, then business should use all the power it has,
You described earlier that you're not perfect. And by not you, I mean Lush as an organisation isn't perfect. I'm sure that you have, you exude so much enthusiasm and passion. I imagine you have a list as long as your arm of things that you want to do.
Biggest critic.
What are some of those things on that list that you're like, I really want to get going on solving those issues?
I'll tell you straight away, because I've tried this so hard. It's refill and reuse.
Yeah.
Yes. I think we're in a really tricky situation at the moment where we all know that especially in the UK is a small country. So you can actually have a fully collaborative, systemic reuse and refill system if brands decide to collaborate and share packaging, for example.
Yes, because it does require that standardization, presumably.
Exactly, yeah. So there are people doing this. There is an organization called Reposit. There is another organization in Germany doing the same. They're called CME. Oh, they're called Zero with many O's at the end of the zero. And they're also starting Ottawa in Canada, a big collaborative project. So many brands, Loop TerraCycle, they did a trial here in Tesco and that went. So we are in this place where brands say, the customers are not ready. And then the customers are ready, but we need to make it really convenient, right?
Yes.
So there's been so many learnings from the previous years, and we know that to make this truly environmental, we need to do it at scale. So it's like this chicken and egg situation. Do we wait for the customers to be ready? But and also the costs are super high. So the first adopters of something like this are paying the price.
Yeah.
But if everyone joins it and everyone does it, it's actually going to be cheaper, more environmentally friendly, like truly environmentally friendly, way more than recycling, and probably convenient for customers because they can shop anywhere and drop it off anywhere. But we need to get there. And then that change is really tricky for a business.
We were having this conversation on the podcast the other day. We were like, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could reimagine the ice cream van model for deliveries and refills of things? And then, how exciting would it be that you're like, it's Wednesday afternoon. The Lush van is going to be
Lush
here.
lorry.
The Lush lorry.
Ice creams come with a bath bomb.
Yeah. And then, maybe you could get some, nuts and seeds and whatever else you need at the same time. But that convenience is always such a big barrier for people to make a sustainable choice. It's got to be easier, cheaper before people are really, really convinced often.
Able and Co have done this really well. So Able and Co that do organic food delivery, they partner. So one of those, because you need the startups that are like what I call the connective tissue for these things to happen. And there is a startup called Club Zero that they wash the packaging and they'll, and refill it, but they'll provide that service to the brand. So for example, Able and Co, I order my lentils, my oatmeal, my salt, all in returnable packaging. And then my milk. So I get milk, my hazelnut milk comes in a bottle. And it comes with my vegetables. And then they take all the packaging away. And then they also reuse the box. They reuse the ice packs. They've created a truly circular model where you can shop. Like my shopping at home is almost zero waste. Yeah, because of Able and Co. So, having...
They were the first people.
The people that have actually done the work and made it convenient. It's like one order.
Yeah. Do you think if you manage to achieve that reuse, refill, what am I trying to say, ethos within Lush, do you feel, Ruth, that you can sit back and go, my work here is done?
No. I always say... Well, I think I've been misquoted on this as well, but I would like to be able to, at some point, answer the question, is the world better because Lush exists? Yeah? And that is a philosophical question, but it's also a very technical question. And the technical question, I also think we need to be able to answer in order to be able to say that. And I think you could say yes, about very few brands at the moment because the system is broken.
Yeah.
So I think our responsibility as a brand now is to do business while regenerating the system. It's not even repair. We cannot repair anymore because there are some fundamental assumptions and premise in the underlying economic system that are just not true. So how are we transforming society, transforming economy, transforming systems at the same time as having a viable brand in the old way of doing things, right? So and that is a big responsibility. So I also don't know if we're going to be able to do it, you know, but I think it's still worth trying.
So what is the answer to, do you think the world is a better place with Lush in it?
So we talk a lot about regeneration. And I think regeneration has a key principle, which is it's not just solving a problem and it's not just doing something good. It's actually how do we evolve the capacity of the whole system to go to a next order of, you know, of their system evolution towards more life. We know that life has evolved on the planet with the key principle that lives create more lives. So we can only breathe today because of fungi and algae and trees, and because fungi found a way to break trees down. And that's why we don't have piles of carbon, you know, and actually a complex life could evolve. And then here we come with all of our hubris and start designing systems that are literally breaking those systems apart.
Yeah.
So how do we align like human principles and human endeavor to those very key basic living principles? And that means we're building capacity, we're evolving the capacity of systems to support more complex life.
Yeah.
And I think at Lush, we have the things that we are really good at. We have done it in a way that it's not just us doing what's good, it's evolving the capacity of the system to do the same. And this is a huge difference between sustainability and what we're trying to do. So it's like, how do we just don't want to buy fair trade ingredients. We want to invest in the supply chain. So we're developing new possibilities of regenerative materials to reach the market.
Yeah.
So this was a long time ago. We really wanted to remove palm oil from our soap base. So we worked with a soap manufacturer to develop a new soap base, but then that soap base was available to the market.
Yeah.
We don't want to just have like a bunny cruelty-free label on our products. We have Lush Prize, which is a 10-year-old prize to support science for animal testing replacements. We funded one of the main completely animal-free testing labs in the world called Accelerate that tests a lot of our products. We have engaged with the parliament here in the UK to make sure that fighting animal testing continues in the government agenda. So that's like the systemic view, right, of where we are in this ecosystem. And I think that's very unique and really important. Yeah, that we're just not doing good. We're trying to make sure that more people can do that.
And in terms of addressing the systemic challenges that still exist, if you could be granted a couple of wishes that might solve them,
Just two.
just two, what would you ask for?
It's hard, right? I always say it's not me saying this, I'm probably quoting someone, but the highest leverage we can have is changing the fundamental way that people think, right? Changing the worldview. So I think my wish is that we would be able to see ourselves as part of nature and see ourselves as in this like co-creation with life, and then make sure that all design decisions come from this really fundamental reimagining of what's being human on the planet right now. But that's very like philosophical. I think right now, my biggest wish would be that we really stop producing fossil fuels. I think if I could have like a magic wand, is to end fossil fuel production.
So it's just a small ask.
And
then
my
right.
second one is
Yeah.
end deforestation. I think those are our global priorities right now. It's like really like transitioning away from fossil fuels. And that means plastic, all the agricultural inputs, right, that are made from fossil fuels, fertilizers, pesticides, like fossil fuels everywhere, our clothing.
Yeah.
Like really transition away from fossil fuels and stopping deforestation. And then we're good.
We're good,
And then
yeah.
we have time. Then we have time
Yeah.
to do the inner work. We have time to do the connection, to
We have
build
time
community.
to pop a bath bomb in, light a
Exactly,
candle.
have fun.
Yeah.
But until then, we're
You're not going to rest, Ruth, are you? We have one question that we ask all of our guests that come on. So we're going
Ooh.
to end, I think, things now
Yes.
with that final question. Imogen, take it away.
So we're asking each of our guests to share with the listeners a sustainability tip that you've been given by somebody else that you'd like to pass on.
We need to start preparing people for this question.
We absolutely do.
I'm trying to think something small. I think it was a long time ago, and I went to visit the Greenpeace headquarters in the middle of the Amazon. And that's when I found out that 80% of the deforestation was connected to meat. That was the first time I found that out. And then I was like, right, that's probably one of the biggest things we can do for the whole system is just to eat less meat for animals and for the planet, for our health.
Wow.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a very like high scientifically resourced advice that I got
But
in
I
the right
imagine-
place at the right time.
It was also like a jaw to the floor moment where sometimes the stat just hits different, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it was a long time ago. They showed me the maps, like the deforestation maps and the
Wow.
work that they were doing to fight deforestation in the Amazon. Yeah, and I was very like, wow, this is so real.
And especially because you'd experienced that deforestation,
Yeah.
seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
And imagine the next time that you picked up a chicken sandwich, thought,
Yeah.
ooh.
Yeah. I think I
thank
was
you.
already like pretty I was already not eating much meat, but like it just made it so clear. I think I started because of animal rights, and then that was a moment that I was like, actually. And then also if you're in the Amazon, it's such an intense experience. So you're going through like forest, and then you see no forest. Just they leave the Brazil nut trees because that has some economic value, and just like cows, but it's not. It's like a couple of cows or a few cows for where there once was crazy biodiversity, right? One of the biggest biodiversities on the planet, and it's so shocking. Yeah.
I was shocked, had to cough. Yeah, and I think something that we see here in the UK is just Google Images, and it's not going to hit in the same kind of visceral.
And I think that's why it's been so interesting to hear from you, Ruth, someone that has grown up somewhere and like literally felt it and lived it, and then brought that to a country that is doing a lot of it and is, you know, a big old cause of some of the issues. So all power to you. It has been so wonderful to have you on Green Queens. Ruth Andrade, I can't roll my tongue, but I really tried. Thank you. The first environment officer for Lush. We tried to ask you so many times what your job title was. You were like, that'll do. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Green Queens. If you did and you'd like to hear more, we'd be so very grateful if you could like, subscribe and join the Green group chat for weekly episodes.